Well, thank you to everyone for being here. It looks like we're getting more and more folks on the call. So thrilled you're all joining us from Penn State and from across the country. The Alliance for American Leadership is a grassroots coalition dedicated to restoring and strengthening our international assistance programs. We started out last year after the shutdown of USAID and have really been growing a lot since then. And I want to say thank you to everyone who has been part of that effort in Pennsylvania across the country to lead the fight to show that international assistance programs are in America's national interests and are good for the world as well. So grateful to have both Congressman Fitzpatrick and Congressman DeLuzio on the call today. Thank you, Brian Fitzpatrick, for being here. I think it's so important to rebuild that bipartisan consensus for international assistance. This was always a very bipartisan issue. It's said that Republicans historically were pro-higher USAID budgets than Democrats. If you go back, it was Bush and Reagan that were really pushing for those high budgets. And so, I think rebuilding that support on the other side of the aisle, one vote at a time, and working with folks like you, Congressman, to do that is going to be critical and is going to be what allows us to really create a stronger future for international assistance. So I'm incredibly grateful to you being here, and I know your constituents are as well. The Alliance for American Leadership has now grown to over 70,000 members across the country, with a particularly strong presence in Pennsylvania. We're thrilled to be bringing together folks that believe in international assistance, that believe in American leadership on the world stage. Of course, the shutdown of USAID has had really dire consequences, both from the humanitarian lens, but also to our national security and to our relationships. And I think we're going to talk a lot more about that today. So with that, I'll introduce Administrator Andrew Natsios, the former administrator of USAID. Off to you, Andrew.
Thank you for inviting me. You want me to start speaking?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I don't have to review what happened in the last year. I'm coming out with a book that's being published by Bloomsbury in November. I've been working on it for 20 years. I had to write 2 new chapters over what happened in the last year. It's called Guns Are Not Enough, Foreign Aid and the National Interest. The title of the book comes from General James Mattis, the famous Marine Corps general who was Secretary of Defense under President Trump's first term, and who was a big advocate of foreign assistance. And he gave a speech and said, the less foreign aid you give, the more bullets you're going to have to send to us in the Pentagon. And I tell that story in the book, but the book is a bureaucratic study based on James Q. Wilson's famous book, Bureaucracy. But it's got stories in it to make it more interesting than a typical political science book. It's for a general audience. In any case, what the argument I make in the book and that I've made over the past year is that foreign aid serves multiple purposes simultaneously. And that is something people don't realize. And no matter what we do, it's always going to do that. Everything we do abroad, even if we're doing it purely for humanitarian reasons, has political consequences and diplomatic and defense consequences. I'll give you one example. There was a terrible tsunami in Aceh, Indonesia, day after Christmas, I think it was, in 2004. And it killed 125, 130,000 people in a matter of minutes, because this tsunami is a giant tidal wave, 50 feet high, and it just wiped out the whole city. We did our typical humanitarian response. President Bush ordered the military that was coming back from the Iraq war to help us logistically. We sent a large team of disaster assistance response team in, and we did the response. We were the dominant force, and you have the U.S. aid from the American people. That is a logo that we created when I was administrator in 2003. They've abolished it since, which is a terrible idea. I was told by an advertising person it was worth billions of dollars in terms of brand name recognition around the world. In Kosovo, after one of the refugee emergencies, kids were named USAID for their, and this is a Muslim society, by the way, in Kosovo. They were naming their boys, the first name was USAID. And that happens a lot around the world. You'll see the evidence of the effect of USAID. We didn't do the response in Indonesia because we wanted publicity, but we got it anyway. Osama bin Laden's support in Indonesia, the largest Muslim country in the world, was at 58% approval rating. We were at a 26% approval rating before the Aceh tsunami. 3 months later, 5 different newspapers did polls. His polls, but bin Laden's polls, collapsed from 58% to 28%. US polls increased from 26% to 63%. And the CIA told me that bin Laden was furious over this. And the newspapers in Indonesia said, "Where's our friend bin Laden, who we love? He's missing." The Americans, who we don't particularly like all the time, don't agree with, are responding to the tragedy here in a very visible way. And so we did not intend to improve our poll rating, but that was one of the consequences. So our humanitarian assistance program had political and diplomatic consequences, which is true all over the world. To have shut down that whole process, in my view, was a disaster. There are 500 people in that bureau. I think they transferred 60 or 70 to state, but they can't field a disaster assistance response team. They say they're going to hire new people, but it will take years for them to develop the experience needed to carry these programs out. There's a second thing that AID does people don't, or almost no one knows of. I don't think many people in Congress who are pro-aid even know this. There is a thing called the Green Revolution. It was started in the 60s by Dr. Norman Borlaug, who was a professor here at Texas A&M. He won the Nobel Prize for peace in 1970 for the Green Revolution. But most people don't know the implementer of his effort to breed high-yield seed for poor people's crops in the developing world. It was implemented by AID. Half our budget in the 1970s was spent implementing the Green Revolution of Dr. Borlaug. And I asked him once, "Is that true?" He said, "Absolutely, it's true." And you can go back to the historical record. But AID was very quiet about it. Why is that important? Well, when he died, Dr. Borlaug died, they did some very careful analyses for how many people he saved through the Green Revolution, who would have starved to death otherwise. And it was on the order of 1 billion people's lives were saved. At the same time that we were saving 1 billion people's lives by implementing his program, Mao Zedong was implementing the worst catastrophe of the 20th century, the Great Leap Famine in China from 58 to 62 that led to the death of 45 million people. 45 million people. So while we were feeding the world, Mao was killing his own people, not intentionally, but through his insane schemes, collectivizing the farms. And I can go through other examples like this. We created, the other donors in the United States, AID, a permanent institutionalization of the Green Revolution in the late 1960s in order to deal with plant diseases and different crops. There's a center for maize or corn and wheat in Mexico, but it's an international organization. It's part of this network. AID has been the largest donor for 60 years. These centers are collapsing now because AID's support for these centers has also ended. People don't realize it, but we are eating AID wheat in this country. 60% of the wheat people eat here, through the flour that we eat bread from, is was developed at this center in Mexico. Why is that? There was a disease called the wheat fungus. It was a wheat rust, and it was spreading all over the world. Dr. Borlaug's last act before he died was to gin up the research centers it's called CIMMYT in Mexico, to develop a breed of wheat that was resistant to the wheat rust. And they did successfully. And AID, along with other donors, got this out to the agriculture ministries around the world. It saved the wheat crop in the developing world, but it also is used, because there's no patent on this wheat seed, in the United States. 60% of the wheat grown in the United States is in fact AID wheat from the CIMMYT Center. You can ask the CIMMYT scientists, many of whom, thousands of whom, are being laid off around the world. There's a center on rice in the Philippines. There's a center on potatoes in Peru. There are 14 of these huge research centers. Most people don't know about them, but you're eating their food. Another example is sorghum. In Africa, it's what people eat. It's drought resistant, uses 40% less water than wheat does, or corn. And sorghum in the United States, we're the largest producer of sorghum, is animal feed. In Texas and Kansas, the largest producers. We had a delegation of ranchers from Texas come to AID to thank us for developing a striga-resistant sorghum. Striga is a parasitic weed. It kills the sorghum crops. And a Ethiopian American scientist who teaches at Purdue, is an agricultural scientist. He's from Ethiopia, migrated, became an American citizen. He developed, with AID funding, a striga-resistant sorghum seed. It's grown all over Africa now, all over Asia, and in the United States. It saved the sorghum crop. Dr. Gabesa won the World Food Prize because of developing this seed. When you eat Texas beef, you're eating AID beef, in a manner of speaking. He got his PhD with an AID scholarship. His research was funded by AID, which he says publicly. This is not a secret. Without Dr. Gabesa, we would not have developed the seed necessary to stop the striga epidemic that was taking place around the world. We are benefiting from these things, but no one knows about it in the United States. All of these research stations are now at the risk of collapsing because of funding that's collapsed because of AID going away. So the State Department is very well intentioned, but they don't have agricultural scientists there who understand the importance of this. And so these programs have been ended, which is, I think, a disaster. I could go on all afternoon. I teach a class in development theory and practice where I go through the scholarship on this. But we benefit in many respects. One last example, we had set up in 1983 during the Reagan administration a program to help ministries of health collect data on morbidity, mortality, disease, novel diseases, new diseases, child survival, maternal immunization rates, all health data. It's been operating since 1983 in 90 countries. It is the system for us to know what's going on in the developing world, particularly in terms of new diseases. Now, you cannot stop a pandemic when it gets to the borders of the United States. It's too late. You have to stop it at the source, and the source sometimes is the U.S. Some scientists say that the 1918 pandemic that killed 5% of the world's population in 6 months, 90 million people died in 6 months from the great influenza, that started in Kansas. We think, we don't know, but we know that a lot of, like Ebola, did not start in the U.S., it started in Africa. And the question, of course, is, would we have found out about it if we hadn't had these data collection systems? That data collection system is about to collapse because they stopped funding it. Gates Foundation said we can do it for a year, but we don't have the money or the field staff to manage this. Who is going to help us, number one, to tell when there's a new disease, and secondly, and most importantly, who is going to send teams out to stop the pandemic? AID stopped the Ebola pandemic in West Africa. The DART team stopped it. And we worked with the governments of Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone. 12,000 people had already died of Ebola. It's a horrible disease. We started having deaths in Texas from it. We need that system in place in order to protect the American people and people in the developing world. So there's an example of where a program protects both people from rich countries and poor countries at the same time. Those systems are invisible to the average person. We had 60 USAID missions in the field. Most of the aid staff is not in Washington, it's in the missions. All those missions were shut down, which in my view was one of the most irresponsible acts in the last year. So I could go on again, but let me leave it with that.
Thank you, Administrator Natsios. Next, I want to go to Jackson Duncan, our field director in Bucks County. We'll give a short introduction to the Congressman.
Thanks, Asher. Hi, everyone. My name is Jackson Duncan. I'm a legislative intern and the field director in Pennsylvania's 1st Congressional District with the Alliance for American Leadership. As a member of the 1st District, I would like to sincerely thank Representative Fitzpatrick for voting against the USAID cuts last year. And I would also like to voice my appreciation on behalf of myself and other members of my community. It was fantastic to get to promote this event back home in Bucks County, putting up posters, reaching out to the community, and spreading the word about foreign aid here on campus at Temple in Philadelphia. I'd like to say thank you to everyone from Bucks County and the 1st District that was able to make it on the call today. We appreciate you all being here. I'm proud to be a part of the effort to mobilize people in support of foreign assistance, and proud that I'm represented by someone who has already shown leadership on this issue. So thank you again, Representative Fitzpatrick. And with that, I'll hand it back off to Asher.
Thank you, Jackson. I don't know what I can add to that, but what I can say is that Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick is a true bipartisan leader. When many of his colleagues in the House were unwilling to support USAID, he stood strong. He was one of 2 House Republicans to vote against the Rescissions Act of 2025. That is something that honestly at the time took a backbone of steel, and it is something that we will always be appreciative for. So with that, I want to introduce Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick.
Thank you, Asher. Jackson, good to see you, and thanks for that very, very kind introduction to everybody at the Penn State School of International Affairs, Student Government Association, as well as the Alliance for American Leadership for bringing us all together. Penn State, for me, helped shape my path for public service, and I'm always going to be grateful for the opportunity to be with students who are thinking seriously about leadership, about national security, and about America's role in the world. Before serving in Congress, I served as an FBI special agent. Most of my assignments were overseas throughout Europe and Africa and Asia and the Middle East. My last assignment was in Kyiv in Ukraine, working Russian counterintelligence. And today I serve on the House Intelligence Committee, and I chair the CIA subcommittee. So I oversee, me and my staff, the entire CIA budget, all of their covert operations. It's front and center, the need for foreign assistance, as we heard earlier. Over the course of my career as an FBI agent and now on the Intel Committee, I've certainly seen what instability can produce, how hostile actors exploit weaknesses, how dangerous it can be when the United States waits too long to act or steps back without a strategy. One of the many reasons why I voted against last year's rescission package. When I was in Ukraine, my last FBI assignment before leaving to come back home to run for Congress, USAID had a very, very prominent presence in Ukraine. I worked side by side with them and got a chance, very fortunate to get a chance to work with them and see all the amazing, indispensable work that they were doing there in Ukraine. My support for USAID and all foreign assistance for that matter is rooted in a very simple belief that America should reform what is ineffective, but we should not retreat from the world in ways that weaken our own strategic position. Everybody wants to get rid of fraud, waste, and abuse, but we also need to defend, democracy around the world, and we can accomplish both. Accountability matters, oversight matters, and results matter. Taxpayer dollars, obviously, we always want to spend them carefully and strategically. USAID is, I believe, the best investment we make from a foreign policy standpoint. One of the things I wanted to talk about was my role. I mentioned that I served in Ukraine. I co-chair the Ukraine caucus now in Congress, along with Marcy Kaptur, my colleague from the state of Ohio. And, now as a member of Congress, I've traveled to Ukraine many times. Most recently, I traveled to the front lines in Kharkiv, worked directly with President Zelensky and senior Ukrainian civilian, military, and intelligence leadership. And I've certainly got a front row seat to what happens when freedom is forced to defend itself against authoritarian aggression. I've seen the stakes and the human toll. And I have also seen how much depends upon whether the United States and the free world have the clarity and resolve to lead, which has only deepened my conviction that peace is preserved only through strength. And that's that same principle behind my Peace Through Strength Against Russia Act. It's a Russia sanctions bill. If we want a just and durable peace, then America must be willing to use real leverage, economic pressure, strategic clarity, strong alliances, and sustained leadership to deter aggression and shape outcomes. This is not about one tool by itself. It's about understanding how the full range of American power works together and how the world needs America to lead. Military strength matters, intelligence matters, diplomacy matters, economic leverage matters, and accountable targeted foreign assistance matters as well. None of these are competing ideas, by the way. General Mattis was referenced earlier. He said, if you take away my diplomats, you better give me more bullets. I think that's very succinctly said and very, very true. When America steps back without a strategy, our adversaries do not stand still. They fill that vacuum. So I just want to thank Jackson for that kind introduction. I want to thank Penn State for maintaining your relationship and partnership with me as a proud alum. We always have your back, and I'm proud to be a strong voice for foreign assistance always. I serve on the Foreign Affairs Committee as an intelligence liaison. That's my role on the Intelligence Committee, but I do have a seat on the Foreign Affairs Committee. And we're going to make sure that we always have strong bipartisan support for foreign aid, foreign assistance, to make sure that we never retreat from our responsibility to our allies, to our NATO responsibilities. I'm a member of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. By the way, the defeat of Viktor Orban yesterday, I thought was a great victory for democracy. A huge blow to Vladimir Putin, a huge victory for NATO, a huge victory for the EU. So I think that was a great event for the people of Hungary yesterday. 78%, by the way, turned out to vote, the highest vote turnout since the fall, in the modern era, for that matter. They came out, they spoke, and I'm very, very proud of them for expressing their voice. So with that, yield back. Thank you so much, Asher, for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Congressman. We really
We just
appreciate it.
published a book called Russia Under Putin, Fragile State and Revisionist Power. I'm the editor. Johns Hopkins University Press published it with 12 authors. I have been banned by the Russian embassy because of the book, which I am proud to say. I was told I will never be allowed to step over the entrance to the Russian embassy as a result.
Andrew, I'm surprised you weren't banned before that. It took that to get banned by Russia?
Well,
I'm with you on the Ukraine, fully.
thank you both so much. Next, I want to go to someone at Penn State who has been locally impacted by some of these cuts to USAID. Professor Dr. David Hughes is the director of the USAID Innovation Lab for Current and Emerging Threats to Crops at Penn State University. The lab lost millions of dollars when USAID was shut down, as did similar labs at flagship schools across the country. So with that, Dr. Hughes.
Thank you so much, Asher, and thanks everybody for being here. Obviously, a great pleasure to be able to join this conversation. And as you're probably picking up quite quickly, I'm not an American born. I am a citizen here, but I did come here from Ireland to the United States and was blown away what America has achieved through the land grant system of universities historically, as Andrew sort of articulated about the role of Borlaug in the Green Revolution. And it was, as I stated, when I became director of the USAID Innovation Lab, the honor of a lifetime to be able to leverage the tax dollars that we have here and do good globally and kind of continue in a long history of the application of agricultural science to tricky problems. Since the fall of the innovation labs, we have indeed, as Asher said, lost a great deal. So Andrew did a really good job of bringing us up to speed of some of the great accomplishments. One thing that perhaps is not well known is that a relatively minor part of the budget, roughly about $70 or $80 million a year, was put in place to what are called innovation labs. So recognizing the great history of land grant research, what we tried to do was build that capacity in countries where we worked, feed the future countries across the world. And after USAID stopped, Senator Hyde-Smith of Mississippi did a really good job articulating as to why we should be bringing it back. And she in the case of Mississippi, they had a fish innovation lab, so helping communities around the world increase aquaculture. And she very simply said, we should take this sort of biblical lesson of you can either give a man a fish or you can teach him to fish. And that's what the innovation labs have done. And they've done it principally because it's what the United States has done since 1862. So some people try to think of Penn State as a football team with a university attached and a college of ag on the side. I sort of think it in the reverse order. We were a farmers' field school in 1855. Through Lincoln and the Morrill Act of 1862, we became the land grant system of universities. And America has accomplished much with this sort of applied research. One, of course, is the Dust Bowl. Andrew mentioned the Green Revolution with Borlaug. It's not the full story. In 1946, after the United States defeated Japan, we took the rice, Nor and 10 out of Japan. We brought it to USDA, to scientists at Washington State, and Borlaug came afterwards. And my critique of USA during the event, I think my critique of people on the Hill when I've given testimony, is we don't seem to do a great enough job of emphasizing the historical legacy of the land grant universities and particularly the role that they can play going forward. I often say as an immigrant, America is number one in everything except humility. And the places where America has done a really good job has been the land grant systems of universities. So as Asher said, we were an innovation lab. We got stopped overnight. Things are coming back. We just submitted an application for the State Department system. In our case, we were the current and emerging threats to crops innovation lab. So the fungi that Andrew talks about, that's the work that we have developed through our platform here at Penn State Plant Village. That platform has been leveraged by the United Nations to work across 65 countries and 35 languages. If you've heard of the locust crisis of 2020, it was Penn State Technology Plant Village that solved that problem. We helped save food for 41 million people at a value of $1.7 billion. A really great accomplishment that we should all be proud of here. And our argument is that we need to restart these. We did a terrible disservice to ourselves by stopping them. It'll take a very long time to restart them. And we are losing out to competitors, perhaps competitors that don't share our interests and our approach. And one can immediately think of the role that China is playing across Africa, Asia, and also in South and Central America. So the idea is that we need to rapidly start these up as quickly as possible. And especially because of the greater and many challenges that we face in growing food and the fact that there are no borders for plant diseases, exactly as Andrew said. So in our case, we're working with Pennsylvanian farmers in Lancaster County. We're working also with Kansas farmers who are growing wheat and looking at the way in which our technology through Penn State, this plant village model, can be boots on the ground, deployed as a forward deployed force to look for diseases, help partners deal with those diseases locally, but then also act as an early warning system for things that can threaten American agriculture. I'm rather enthusiastic about the way in which State Department have framed things and are thinking about this new America First Feed the Future Innovation Lab, where you make America safer, stronger, more prosperous. I don't say that for jingoism. I actually think it's a very simple and a precise approach. If we are paying the bill for overseas international development, it should benefit our farmers. It should benefit our companies like John Deere or Phosphollutions, a Penn State spinout. So I think there's a lot to be enthusiastic about. But the proof is in the pudding. We'll see how State Department responds, and we'll see the extent to which they organize themselves into a coherent Feed the Future Innovation Lab. But it has been a really great success story, and something that I hope will continue. And at least this Irishman is happy for it. Thank you, Asher. Back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Hughes. I appreciate that immensely. And thank you for being here. Next, I want to go to our Pennsylvania state chairs that continue to lead the fight for international assistance in Pennsylvania, starting with Moira O'Brien, the former director of Sudan and South Sudan programs at USAID.
Thank you, Asher. I'm delighted to be with you all this afternoon. I'm Moira O'Brien. I was in the Foreign Service with USAID for over 14 years. My last overseas assignment was as Deputy Mission Director for USAID in Pakistan. And until last July, I was the Director for the Office of Sudan and South Sudan Programs in Washington, D.C. Now I'm back home in southeastern Pennsylvania. For me, the real horror of the shuttering of USAID has been the tremendous senseless suffering that it entailed. It was an early indicator of the current administration's total lack of regard for human life and human dignity. We've seen the same disregard for humanity, peace, and security repeatedly since, especially just these last weeks as the Trump administration has ignited and escalated a senseless and devastating war across the Middle East. The consequences of cutting off foreign assistance globally are horrific, but civilians in Sudan are living through some of the most brutal consequences. The civil war in Sudan will mark its 3rd anniversary this coming Wednesday, which means the conflict's entering its 4th year. The war has displaced over 14 million people, nearly 30% of its population, creating the world's largest humanitarian and displacement crisis, and left millions facing famine. Last June, The Lancet published a study estimating that USAID programs have saved over 90 million lives over the past 2 decades. That's a legacy that I'm tremendously proud to be a part of, and I think that every American should be too. The Lancet researchers also estimated that going forward, 14 million people who might have otherwise lived could die in the next 5 years. But that's not an inevitability. That's something that we have the power to change. And that's why I think the work of the Alliance for American Leadership is so important. And I thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Moira. Appreciate all that. Next, I want to go to Chris Jottis, our Pennsylvania co-chair, former Army officer, and someone who can speak about the soft power impact of international assistance programs.
Okay. Hey. Oh, can you hear me, guys?
Yeah, I can hear you, Chris.
Okay, thanks. Hey, so like Asher said, my name is Chris Jottis, co-chair here in Pennsylvania. I'm also a retired Army officer, and my 21-year career in the Army consisted of 2 combat tours in Iraq, 3 years supporting NATO while stationed in Europe, and 8 years in the Pentagon developing national security policy. Nowadays, I support development of defense and national security technologies. And as I said here at A4L, I'm a co-chair of PA and also a board member. And what brought me to A4L was a desire to correct some of the misconceptions about what U.S. foreign aid does, what it costs, with the reality being it's a pretty small investment for what we get. And I think it's already been mentioned 5, 6, a billion times already, but there's an old saying in the circles that every dollar spent in foreign aid can save $100 in military intervention. So to me, as a combat vet, that's not just, kind of a saying. It's not just a budget line. It means fewer soldiers like myself, like 25-year-old Chris Jottis, being put in harm's way. And strategically, it means we're solving problems before they escalate and not waiting for the proverbial check engine light of diplomacy to flash before we take action. It also changes the face of American power. It ensures the person's first interaction with an American isn't a soldier with a rifle, imprinting a lifelong stereotype, but rather someone helping develop utilities, schools, agriculture, etc. The old, more bees with honey. And while I was in Iraq, we helped build out some of these. We helped build out schools and government and whatnot, but it just doesn't hit the same when you also have to carry a rifle everywhere you go. It definitely comes with a certain conception that we're here to help, but who knows what next. So, and moving on, it's no secret we're in a more global, more volatile global environment. That kind of harkens back to the Cold War era, which most people on this call probably weren't alive for, but we're no longer sort of the sole global superpower on the block, and now locked in direct strategic competition. And to win that competition requires every tool of the diplomatic toolkit. Foot stomp every tool of the diplomatic toolkit. And that just doesn't mean having the tools. It means trained and experienced people using those tools and not waiting for the last minute to figure it out. Kind of an anecdote I have from my time long ago when I was in Iraq, 2 decades ago now. We would get all these systems. We'd get these systems pushed forward by the Army while we were in the middle of the war. No training, no experience, no manual on how to use it. They just say, this is what it's supposed to do, make it happen. And not exactly the situation you want to be in, figuring out how to use the tool for the first time in the middle of combat operations, in the middle of a mission. And when you can avoid that, you definitely want to avoid that and reduce the risk. And that's what we're talking about here. These aren't tools that we're just getting. These are tools that we have and need to maintain, and an environment where we will undoubtedly, need them moving forward in the future. And another comment I make often too is sometimes, when you're doing the international development, and mine's more so on the national security side, but economically, sometimes you don't have functioning economies that have financial markets where you can, enter into trade and contracts and whatnot. And the only tool you have, is aid for some period of time before you can maybe move forward. And sometimes that's the only tool you'll have. So, we need to, going back to make sure we have the people trained and experienced in how to use these. So that's the mission. That mission is exactly why I joined the board here, and I'm grateful to have everyone here on the line to support. So back to you, Asher.
Thank you, Chris. I really appreciate you being here. Next, I want to go to Zachary Morrill, who helped plan this event, made it all possible. Zach's also put forth a resolution that the Penn State student body will vote on to restore USAID. So with that, off to you, Zach.
Hey, thank you for the introduction, Asher. Like you said, my name is Zach Morrell, and I'm the president of the Penn State School of International Affairs Student Government Association. Thank you all for joining us today, and a special thank you to the representatives for taking time out of your busy schedules to come meet with us today. It means a great deal to the Penn State community, and especially to the School of International Affairs, SIA here, that leaders from both parties are here to discuss an issue that affects our university, our Commonwealth, and communities abroad. Really quickly, before I start talking about the statistics of everything and build on what my peers and colleagues have talked about, I just want to tell a story really quick. Within the past month, I took a week to study abroad in Costa Rica. We fly down, it takes about 4 hours. We get on the bus. We have a translator with us there showing us all around. We drive through 2 volcanoes to get to a agricultural institution named Cartier. That was founded by Henry Wallace. Henry Wallace helped to establish that institution, the old vice president. When we get there, I walk right into the doors to start taking notes from the very intelligent professors there. I sit down, I take my notebook out, I look right to my right, and I see a sticker there that says USAID. The desk was built by the people of the United States, given to them to help further their educational opportunities. In return, they're able to practice agroforestry practices in return to send back to the United States. They grow stuff there that we can't grow, such as cacao, coffee bean production, plantains and bananas, stuff that we have no access to growing here. But just something as simple as taking a week down to go to Costa Rica, I was able to see the direct impact that USAID has. At the Penn State School of International Affairs, where my colleagues and I attend, it's really hard to not take the dismantlement of USAID personal. Many of our students came to SIA with the explicit goal of serving for USAID, the Foreign Service, or international development organizations. They built their academic plans, their internships, and their career pathways around the agency's mission. Some even came to Penn State with fellowships directly through USAID. With the agency now dismantled, those pathways have narrowed dramatically. Those that came here with those fellowships lost those fellowships. And the students who hope to dedicate their careers to humanitarian response, development policy, and global crisis management now face a landscape with fewer opportunities, fewer training programs, and fewer entry points into public service. The closure of USAID has also disrupted the work that makes Penn State a national leader in agricultural and development research. Just to reiterate what Dr. Hughes previously mentioned, the USAID Innovation Lab for Current and Emerging Threats to Crops is here. And just not to underplay it, this was a $39 million effort that was supposed to help people detect pests and diseases before they spread, specifically farmers. And when USAID went away, that lab stopped in its tracks. Thankfully, Dr. Hughes said they're just trying to get the momentum back. However, when it immediately stopped, they had lost $9 million in funding, and then the rest of it eventually went away. So you have to come back and get it back. Just to reiterate something, foreign assistance accounts for roughly 1% of the budget. Just once again to say that 1% of the budget, yet USAID supported programs have been credited with saving tens of millions of lives. I believe it was Maura who said around 90 million within 2 years. I mean, the impact is substantial. And at home, Pennsylvania farmers, we've long supplied U.S. international food aid programs, collectively purchasing billions of dollars in American-grown commodities each year. However, the abrupt closure of USAID is estimated to have cost tens of thousands of jobs worldwide, exposed the U.S. government to billions of legal liabilities due to incomplete termination procedures, and puts millions of lives at risk. In direct response, students at Penn State have drafted a resolution affirming that humanitarian aid and global development are essential to global stability and U.S. national security, and are calling on Congress to restore and fully fund USAID, increase investment in diplomacy and development, and recognize that these cuts impact students, researchers, and Pennsylvania's agricultural economy entirely. Today, following this event, we'll begin collecting those signatures from students, faculty, alumni, and community members who wish to support this resolution. These signatures will accompany the final document that we're going to transmit to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, the House Foreign Affairs Committee, the Pennsylvania delegation, and Pennsylvania state leadership. Today's discussion is a reminder that humanitarian aid is not a partisan issue. It reflects American values, American leadership, and the belief that our expertise, such as that found at universities like Penn State, can make the world safer, more stable, and more humane. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Zach. Next, I want to go to someone that we are thrilled to work with in that fight to restore foreign assistance programs. Congressman Chris DeLuzio serves on the Armed Services Committee and continues to respect that balance between diplomacy, development, and defense. And we are thrilled to work with him going forward. So with that, Congressman Chris DeLuzio.
Asher, thanks for the introduction. Great to be with you, everyone here today. Alliance for American Leadership, Penn State School for International Affairs, Penn State Student Government, and so many others. I know that the topic is diplomacy, but I grew up as a hardcore Pitt fan, and I won't tiptoe around love and Pitt should Pitt and Penn State ever get to meet on a regular way, which we have to do. I'm from the western part of the state, grew up outside Pittsburgh in my congressional district that I'm proud to represent, 17th, all of Beaver County, about half of Allegheny County. My own service background certainly shapes the job I do in the Congress. That's time at the Naval Academy as a naval officer, service at sea, service on the ground in Iraq. But it also shapes my understanding of America's role in the world. And so much of this discussion here today. And look, I am proud to get to represent the place that made me and people who made me, and to think about America's responsibilities, our obligations, what American leadership looks like. And we don't exist in a vacuum, at home or abroad. I've seen, and I think we can envision what a world would look like where America does retreat from the world. And it's quite bleak to think about. And the years of America's leadership certainly had its flaws, but I think the world has been better where America led, where we led with American values. I know the shortcomings of America's power. I served in Iraq. I'm not alone in understanding that hard power can have its limits, that we can make strategic blunders as a government and as a country, and that's been one of them. But again, I think the alternative of the absence of American leadership, and I'm not just talking about hard power, the absence of our leadership makes the world worse off. There are programs that I support that I can't believe we have to even talk about trying to restore support for. PEPFAR is one of those programs. I'm sure folks here know what that program has done over the years, going back to George W. Bush and his administration, had typically and traditionally been a bipartisan program to eradicate and tackle the HIV/AIDS epidemic. Programs like Gavi, right, the Vaccine Alliance, that was a partnership to vaccinate kids across the world, more than 1 billion, as I understand it, immunized, and saving lots of lives. Again, with Americans, not just generosity, but soft power as part of this. And of course, UNICEF and the funding that ought to be there to look out for kids across the world. But again, what have we seen in the last year or so? Elimination of USAID, cuts to life-saving programs, leaving the World Health Organization. The president's budget request proposed zeroing out a program that provides US-grown food to people in need all over the world in countries facing starvation. And again, it's more than American generosity. It's about our role in the world. It's about how people interact with the American people. And that may be the only interaction someone facing starvation may have, is that Americans stepping up to provide something that matters, that might save their life, that supports American farmers and more. And I see those cuts in the backdrop of lots of spending and sacrifice by Americans being sent to fight in Iran. That's cost billions, that 13 Americans have given their lives for, and hundreds more wounded, many more dead or wounded in the region. A world destabilized, energy markets destabilized. I think those priorities are wrong, and our responsibility for those of us who serve in the Congress is to do something about it. So I look ahead, I see life at home, not just in Pennsylvania, but all over the country, remaining too much of a ripoff. I see a government of ours that is too focused on wars of choice abroad. And to me, we ought to fix those priorities, get back to restoring the American dream for everyone in this country. And whatever the American dream looked like in the past, it wasn't for everybody, and it ought to be. It ought to be for every American. And that means fighting for the common good at home and fighting for it abroad. No small tasks, but certainly the responsibility that we have in the Congress, I think. And so I appreciate the engagement and the efforts here to get our country and our government thinking about American leadership, thinking about American power, soft power and influence, and what diplomacy means. And I can quote a lot of generals and admirals who would tell you a version of the same thing, that when you cut diplomacy, when you cut foreign aid, you're going to put more stress and more responsibilities on a military that would rather see things resolved through our diplomats. So those are the stakes and more. I just appreciate the chance to engage, and thank you guys for a little bit of time today.
Thank you so much, Congressman. And I think you're exactly right. We need to get back to good priorities, to understanding that diplomacy and development is a part of our national security strategy and is a critical part at that. Something that President Eisenhower said that really resonates with me is that the peace we seek, founded upon decent trust and cooperation among nations, can be fortified not by weapons of war, but by wheat and cotton, by milk and wool, by meat and timber, and by rice. These are words that translate into every language. And of course, General Eisenhower was also a cattle rancher and was also the president that started Food for Peace. And so I think when we look at the possibility of that program being fully defunded, we have to think through, what does it mean for America to be a powerful country and to be a humane country and a country that folks want to work with. And so I am so honored that you're here, Congressman, and honored to work with you going forward to get funding restored for those programs that need to be funded and that protect American interests and make us look good on the world stage and do the right thing. So thank you, Congressman.
Thank you.
With that, I want to thank everyone for being here today. We have a few opportunities coming up to be more involved at the Alliance for American Leadership. I know there are a lot of students on the call today, so I'll just say that we have interviews twice a week for folks that want to join as legislative and communications interns. I'm going to put in the chat the information for those sessions. So feel free to RSVP for that. In addition, I know there are a lot of folks from USAID and a lot of policy experts on the call today. We're going to have an orientation session for new volunteers from the USAID community on Friday at 2 p.m. So I just put the information in the chat for that as well. Finally, I'll say that, this has really been a community effort over the past year, growing and strengthening this organization and building that grassroots movement for foreign assistance. So if anyone on the call is so inclined to make a donation to continue to support our work, that of course is deeply appreciated. You can chip in at givebutter.com/A4AL, also on our website. I appreciate that a lot. What we say is that every $25 donated allows us to reach 4,500 more Americans through both digital ads and campus organizing efforts. I know in advance of this event, we reached tens of thousands of people. I had folks that, from past lives, like reaching out to me being like, oh, this is a poster for your organization, right, on my campus. So we printed a lot of posters. We talked to a lot of students about the value of foreign assistance. And I think this is important work to continue to do, to lead that fight going forward, to really do the good work at the grassroots level to restore our foreign assistance programs and make them stronger. So please pitch in if you can. Please come to one of those sessions if you're interested in volunteering and doing more, maybe meeting with your member of Congress to discuss foreign assistance. And please continue to be in touch as we work together with Administrator Natsios, with the members of Congress to see what the future of foreign assistance programs can look like. So I appreciate everyone for being here a lot, and I appreciate the fight that we'll continue to have to restore our foreign assistance programs. Administrator Natsios, is there anything that you'd like to add?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone for being here. And I'm honored to be in this fight with you.